for you to, for alums to get more resources should they need it. And then also, as always, we have many events that are going on, so you can check out our events tab to sign up for more events. We know that many of you are also dialing in from many parts of the world. If you do know of other MIT alums who would like to attend MIT Club of Northern California's events and they are not currently a MIT CNC member, please have them talk to their regional clubs as we do have discounts available to MIT alums around the world. And on that note, I just want to do a quick introduction for those of you who may be new to MIT CNC. The MIT Club of Northern California is the regional alumni club of MIT in Northern California. It's run entirely by volunteer MIT alumni. And along its partners, the club organizes approximately 100 events every year, serving over 12,000 alumni in the Northern California area. And during this time, we are opening up our events, since they're all virtual, to other club members too, as we mentioned. And so if you are in the Northern California area, you can also sign up for our weekly email announcements so you can get access to more of events like this in the future. All right, so now that we have many attendees on already, and I'm sure there'll be more trickling in, once again, I just want to remind everyone to please use the Q&A button to ask questions and not the chat, because I can't multitask. All fault to myself. So, all right, let's get started. Oh, by the way, also, if you really enjoyed this series, we are asking you to make a donation to COVID-19 efforts, and you can see the website on the upper right corner. That's www.mitcnc.org/COVID-19. All right, so without further ado, I would like to just quickly introduce myself and then have our panelists also give introduction of themselves. My name is Wendy Zhang, class of 09, courses 18 and 15, and I'm currently a business development partner at Gradient Ventures. I have been talking to many of you regarding what you're doing for COVID-19, and one of the things that has been really inspirational to me is just seeing how alums from across many different courses, across different industries, what they're doing to contribute toward alleviation. And this isn't just alums who are in the medical sector, who are obviously the ones who are having the most direct impact, but we also have many alums, some of whom you'll hear from today, who are using their background in different areas to help with combating the problem. So without further ado, I'd like for each panelist, starting with Pooja, to share your background and story. So Pooja, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. I'm really excited to be a part of this today and joining such a great group of classmates and colleagues. So I feel like many of us participating on this panel and tuning in, I wear many hats these days, but my professional background is in healthcare delivery and innovation. I spent a lot of time in course 7 and 14. And personally, and I'm also involved with with MIT at the institute level as well as at the class level. I stay involved with my class, the class of 1999. So during the day, I'm the founder and CEO of a health technology startup called Novolux, which makes smart and therapeutic windows for rooms that are windowless. And as a side note, before I started this company, I actually spent 10 years as a hospital executive at NYU Langone Medical Center, as well as Brigham and Women's in Boston. So I was very actively involved in hospital emergency preparedness. So a lot of what my colleagues are going through has really been gut-wrenching for me to see and hear. But they're doing a phenomenal job. And during the nights and weekends, I've been really trying to distract myself with passion projects. So, and I'm going to get into that over here when we continue.
Thank you, Pooja. Rishma, would you like to go next?
Hey everyone, I'm Reshma. I am course 6, and a longtime software engineer and entrepreneur. So worked at like Microsoft, Facebook, and Box, and started and sold 2 companies. And my most recent company was acquired, and my son was born in early November. So I was on maternity leave, and then we had a pandemic. So I found another couple moms on also on leave, and we joined a global hackathon. And I think that's what I'm going to tell you about today. We're running a project called Identify the Immune, and recruiting subjects for clinical research in response to the pandemic.
Thank you, Reshma. Next, we have Christine.
Hey, everyone. My name's Christine Lee. I'm a MIT 09 in course 3. And right now I'm a director of professional services at a marketing technology company called Bloomreach in Mountain View, California. So I think that, like a lot of other people here, I was mostly motivated because I felt very helpless in some ways. You know, it's hard to hear that the best thing you can do is stay at home. And, you know, I was trying that for a while and it just wasn't feeling right. And so a bunch of friends, actually Tian is one of them, and a few friends from Newhouse 4, our old dorm, we just started chatting, and we have another friend from the MIT dorm who works in hospital administration. We were just brainstorming, trying to get something going, and we landed on this project, which is basically a fundraiser to try to get masks imported from China to various healthcare workers around the country. So it's been very helpful to kind of like what Pooja and Reshma said, just fill some time with a passion project and help people along the way.
Thank you, Christine. And last but not least, Tian.
Hey everyone, my name's Tian, and I currently split my time. I'm course 6, 2006, and I currently split my time between New York and Atlanta. And so, as you guys know, New York was one of the earliest places to get hit in the U.S. So not only did I feel it very early on, but throughout, you know, sort of different networks, I felt it in different ways. So my MIT first roommate at MIT, he's a doctor in New York. One of my good friends started a volunteer initiative focused on PPEs, providing PPEs for New York hospitals. And so during my daytime, I spend most of my time operating a supply chain focused distribution business. And so where I could really help right away was on the sourcing side. And so that's how I got myself really involved. And then I'm also a partner at a early stage venture fund. And right now, currently, I'm involved in 3 different volunteer initiatives. One is That Mask Squad, which is the Newhouse 4 initiative that Christine and I are part of. And then also the COVID-19 Collective, which is a really just an online community for volunteer initiatives organizers to get together and help each other. And then lastly, and the latest is that in sort of starting with PPEs for healthcare, I've realized also that there's a massive need just for masks for average Americans to help flatten the curve. And so this last one is called Zero Mask, and it's something that's about 3 days old. So those are the 3 different areas that I'm working on right now.
Thank you all so much, and we'll go into more details on what each of you are doing. Since Christine and Tian were talking about PPEs, I do want to just have a quick call out that on April 22nd, which is Earth Day, did you know that? I know that now. It's Earth Day on April 22nd from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. There will be an event called Fix the PPE, Hack the Mask. And basically, it's a virtual idea storm around two potential solutions. One is fixing the supply chain, and then two is creating a new supply chain. So be on the lookout for more information on that, and that will be posted on, if not already, on mitcnc.org. So all right, for those of you who may have just joined now, please make sure to add your questions to the Q&A tab and not the chat box. All right, so now we'd love to continue going into each of our panelists and what you're doing. Really, you know, the inspiration behind this is really to think, okay, there's so many different ways, at least I've been feeling helpless, but there are also so many ways to help from many different areas. And I know, Pooja, you've been doing something really neat with the class of 99. So I'd love to invite you to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing in that space.
Sure. Thanks, Wendy. So, you know, I think from my perspective, it really started, I think, as soon as most of us around the country were going into isolation. We you know, were really amongst ourselves. And one of the things during this crisis is that, you know, anxiety has been really high. Loneliness seems to be, you know, picking up. Isolation's the new norm. And it's, you know, those are different pain points. And so specifically, we said as a class, you know, given that this is really impacting the sort of older population, if you will, we sort of came together and said, you know, what is it that we can do to try to make an impact for that group? And we launched a very simple notion of MIT junior alums, such as all of us on this call, trying to help out our senior alums, just checking in on them and seeing how they're doing, reaching out and offering a conversation point for them and with them. So we're very excited to launch this joint initiative between the club and between our class, and really just check in with our classmates and really try to spread a bit of joy in the process by reaching out. And I can get into the details. We actually launched the initiative as a pilot about a week ago, and it's been really interesting reaching out to these folks because it's resulted in something I wouldn't have necessarily picked up on, but just some fun conversations. I've had actually a conversation and gotten some emails back from members of the class of 1970 and earlier, just saying, "Hey, thanks for reaching out," and they look forward to kind of, you know, paying it forward with us.
Thank you so much, and what a great idea. We'll definitely get into more of the details in a bit and seeing how the rest of us can also contribute toward that effort. I'd like to move to Reshma next. Can you share a little bit more about what you're doing to contributing to the relief of COVID-19?
Sure. And so before I go into kind of what exactly our project is about, maybe we can think about what makes this pandemic so dangerous. I think the main problem is that in our whole population, this is a novel virus, so nobody has any immunity. So, and it also has the potential to be very serious. So anyone you come in contact with who's infected could become very ill, overwhelm the health system, etc. So we have a bunch of friends who are very interested in immunity, and they wanted to study how immunity evolves within a person who gets infected. If they're infected on, the first day and their body starts to produce antibodies in 2 weeks after they've recovered, what's their level of antibodies? Are they actually immune in the future? And I knew some folks doing clinical research on this topic. And I guess one of the bottlenecks that they really ran into is testing is very scarce, so they don't have a lot of people to participate in the research. So they don't know how to even get started on studying this. So we set up identifyimmune.org, And it's basically a website where you register as someone who's had a positive COVID-19 test, and you upload your lab report. And we have a HIPAA secure data vault where all your records are stored. And then we reach out to you. We don't give away anybody's personal information. We send people emails about different clinical research that's going on and ask if they're interested in participating. And once we set up the base website, we actually got contacted by a bunch of different groups, because there's a lot of applications for these COVID positive volunteers. One is to donate plasma. The FDA has has cleared a treatment where someone who has had COVID can give blood, and that the antibodies are purified and given to someone who's very, very ill, and sometimes helps them recover. So it's a compassionate use treatment. And then there's people who are studying, I always get these drugs like wrong, but remdesivir and hydrochloroquine use. So they need people who have tested positive and are in different progressions of their disease also. So we have like a bank of volunteers, and we send them studies that they might want to participate in for clinical research, with the hope of finding out who's immune, what drugs work, and maybe save some lives with the convalescent plasma treatment if that's effective. So that's really our mission. And we don't actually have a big team doing this. We joined the COVID-19 Global Hackathon, myself and a few other people who are on maternity leave. And we're just getting started, and Facebook has given us like a bunch of ads so that we can reach out to people and get some more signups and do the matching. So I think I have been like it's pretty scary to see what's going on in New York and kind of the urgent need there. So if any folks know people who have had a positive, either nasal swab test or serology test and would like to volunteer, it's identifyimmune.org, and you can just put your information there if you have tested positive, and we send email blasts to folks for different research studies that they qualify for.
Thank you so much, and love the ingenuity in using your entrepreneurial skills and coding skills to put things to use, to put your skills to use to help. All right, next we have Christine and Tana. I'd like to just preface this with, I love how the idea started from a group of friends who are living in Newhouse, which it's the dorm right next to where I almost said grew up. I kind of did grow up at MIT, so next house, but how a group of friends from Newhouse decided to come together and start working on something. So I'd love for you both to tell your story about how you formed the group and how you're moving forward with the project.
I guess I'll start, Tian, and then I can hand it over to you, because this was actually just by chance. Like, Tian and I have actually been out of touch for a while, and it was a nice side effect to get back in touch because of trying to be scrappy and trying to figure out like whoever can help us with importing masks from China. And we were like, I think Tian's family business was in importing ATVs. It's just like a very side connection there. But I think, Wendy, like you mentioned, it really started with a bunch of friends talking about and trying to deal with this kind of shock and grief that we've all been going through, and feeling very useless, not knowing how to help, and feeling like we should be able to help because we all went to MIT, like we're capable people, we know how to do things, like anything, let's just find a way to do something. So I think the other thing was we have a lot of friends who are in medicine, who are on the front lines as emergency room doctors, ICU nurses. And we were just hearing these kind of, I mean, everyone knows this at this point because it's all over the news, but these kind of horror stories about them being put in these really challenging scenarios with no, not proper protection, or being asked to kind of conserve when they might be at risk. And so, it started off with just me kind of reaching out to friends and family, like, hey, if you have any N95 masks, can you just, I'll collect them, I'll get them to hospitals. It started off like that, but then, we thought, hey, there's probably a bunch of other people like us who really want to help, but because maybe they have kids or they have crazy jobs right now, like they just don't have the time to really figure out how to do that. So, you know, can we tap into our network to say, just give people an easy way to help financially, basically, you know, if they want to contribute funds, we'll do the heavy lifting to actually go find these masks and connect them to doctors and nurses around the US and try to get them into the right hands and into the hospitals. So that's really how this all started up. And I guess I'll let Tian talk a little bit about the sourcing and the challenges that we've seen there.
Yeah, I think Christine summed it up pretty well. It's for that mask squad, for our GoFundMe, I think what's been really fun has been that it's become both this great thing we're doing for our friends and for the COVID-19 effort more broadly, and an opportunity for all of us to work together, catch up, and almost relive a little bit of the MIT days in some ways, and how we're working together. And so, you know, Christine's done an awesome job of leading us and just being like the lead fundraiser. And then we have Yushan and Ken, who Ken's wife is also an MIT alum and a doctor. And so she's been actually really helpful in that once we actually got the masks into the United States, to actually say, well, do they work? How would she use it? So she almost became our test user, and, if you will. And Yushan's been great at also just finding donors for us, folks who actually need the masks. So we all kind of take a different role. And mine has been on the supply chain side, and the challenges are multifaceted, and I've been in touch with a few different projects now, and it's like most folks are doing this volunteer. They have their day jobs, and then like at night they are working on it, and they're trying to learn how to vet factories. There are factories that are just springing up to produce PPEs, maybe before they were a toy factory. So how do you figure out the certification, and the folks who are doing the purchasing they have to learn themselves on just what are the standards, what are the qualifications, what's the difference between N95 and an KN95 and an FFP2. So it's a ever evolving process. This one is like super accelerated growth stage startup where you're just learning and everything's like scaling and you're just trying to learn as you go. So it's been really interesting, and the experience with that mask my experience with that mask squad, and then also my friend's initiative in New York called A Million Masks, and they had similar issue with the supply chain. Actually made me realize that probably every single project is facing very similar problems. They're reinventing the wheel, and so that gave rise to the COVID-19 Collective, which is what Christine is part of as well. And we have a handful of other GoFundMe organizers who share just knowledge with each other. So much of the crisis is the fact that there's sort of lack of information. There's information discovery that needs to happen. Who needs what? Where is the supplies? Like, how do you do the process? Where are the folks who are cured? You know, bringing everyone together in an online community, even a forum like this, I think is a great way to accelerate the fight.
I'm getting so many happy goosebumps. I don't know what the proper word for that is, but it's just amazing to hear what everyone's doing. And actually, Tian, you started talking about the challenges. Now, obviously, we all know that MIT alums are great at mens et manus, combining the mind and the hand, but also we love solving challenges. So, I'm sure in all of your roles as you're continuing to work on your project for COVID-19, you've come across some pretty sizable challenges. So I know, Tian, you already started talking a little bit about the supply chain, but love to hear from the other panelists, what were some of maybe one or two of the biggest challenges that you're seeing and how you are trying to overcome them or overcoming them.
So I'm happy to volunteer to go first on this because, Tian, what you were saying really sort of hit home. We're all trying to figure this out. I think the biggest part for us was saying, let's make sure we aren't reinventing the wheel. And if it has already been invented, then let's try to be additive to that. But what we found was, for us, actually trying to figure out where the gap was our first challenge, right? So we said, okay, in our project, first of all, are we going to come together to try to tackle something related to MIT and the Institute and that, or are we going to try to tackle something that's more directly related to COVID-19 and the actual pandemic? And we realized as a group, when we came together as class officers and classmates, is that we wanted to try to tackle something related to the Institute. So that was for us the first challenge to overcome, because otherwise it seemed so overbearing to try to figure out how to help and where to help. And even within that, we tried to quickly identify where the gap was, right? So there were people that were trying to help the student body at MIT. There were folks that were trying to help the faculty and the staff who've been displaced, right? And then you have this amazing group of over 150,000 alums worldwide, and we realized there's certainly opportunity to try to address that, and that seemed like for us the place to kind of hone in on. Specific challenges that we faced in the last week or so is, when you're trying to make a phone call to someone, I don't know about all of you, but usually I let it go to voicemail. And so, while our intentions are great, we realized very quickly that, getting someone to pick up the phone on the first ring is challenging. So for us, our focus is going to be to try to prime that pump a little bit. And this is where I think we could use a little bit of help. We're actually going to try to market the fact that we're doing this initiative so that when we do reach out to the alumni, they know to kind of expect a call from another classmate. So take the call. I could share many more, but I thought I'd just leave it at those two.
Yeah, and Pooja, we actually also, since we're on this topic, we also had an anonymous viewer ask, how are your matching needs sourced through conversations? Hold on. How are you matching needs sourced through conversation with help?
Great question. So part of what we're trying to do here is exactly that. It's twofold. One is actually identifying the seniors, if you will, the senior alums, the wise alums that need to be contacted, and creating almost a database or registry of those folks. And then the second prong is actually trying to get more junior alums who are interested in actually helping to be callers, right? And so we've actually, with the help of the Club of Northern California, created an email, spread joy at mitcnc.org. And we're asking folks who are interested in helping to be callers and are interested in reaching out to an older alum to just share your name and your contact information with us so that we can get you the information to get going.
Thank you so much, Pooja. And Rishma, what are some of the, and by the way, I know someone asked about the links to the efforts. We'll definitely send that out after the email as well, but then, after the event. And Pooja already shared spreadjoy.mitcnc.org as one of the venues where she's able to help with matching. Sorry, Reshma, I'd love to turn that to you regarding some of the challenges that one challenge or one or two of challenges that you're constantly thinking about or in the process of tackling.
Totally. So, I mean, starting up any initiative from scratch always has a ton of problems. I think one of Identify the Immune's biggest problems was a very typical MIT problem. This is an extremely cerebral concept to like set up a matching service of COVID positive volunteers and match them with volunteer opportunities. People are like, why would you need that? Everybody just goes and recruits their own volunteers for their own thing. Why do you need a special service aggregator? And so our biggest challenge really has been getting people to really understand the value. And the value really is that a person who's developing immunity goes through a life cycle. You know, they start out ill or maybe asymptomatic, then they develop antibodies, then they become immune, hopefully. And so during different parts of their life cycle, they're eligible for different things. When they're peak immunity, they need to donate plasma to give to someone who's really sick. If they're really early, then they should be piloting new rapid diagnostic tests to see if they work. And as they go throughout their, after they're immune, they should be seeing whether they're actually immune and doing those tests. So one person can participate in 5 or 6 meaningful research or treatment opportunities. And these are extremely high leverage. Like one person whose plasma is donated can save 3 people. Or one clinical study uses 40 to 100 volunteers. Like if you could fill 2 or 3 of those slots with one person, it's extremely high leverage. So kind of getting people to grok that concept has been one of our big challenges. And of course, we never like say, oh, you shouldn't sign up directly for a volunteer opportunity. Absolutely, you should definitely do it. But the identifying the exact problems that people are going to experience as they're trying to solve a problem has been one of the interesting challenges. It's still unsolved. If people know how to solve it, please shout at me. That would be pretty interesting.
And on that note, I also, Matthew Jennison has asked, how does IdentifyImmune.org avoid duplication efforts with other initiatives, both public and private?
Excellent question. Yes, we actually focus on duplication. Duplication is our whole mission. We want one person to participate in many research initiatives. So we like serve as an aggregator for someone who might come in interested to donate plasma to try and help them participate in other initiatives. We actually encourage people to, for example, if they want to sign up directly to donate blood to Mount Sinai, to absolutely do it if they want, and to also register with us so that we can reach out to them about, because we have an analyst team who combs through the research opportunities and like identifies new ones all the time and bets that they're good. So that's kind of how we're working to work against duplication. But one other thing I'll mention is that a lot of these research and plasma donation opportunities are very time sensitive and regional. So if you have like, for example, we had someone in Dayton, Ohio who needed plasma. So we found someone in the Chicago area who could drive to like donate plasma. And if you have to like wait to do a call for volunteers and then pull that volunteer pool back, it will just take too long. So really speed and liquidity are the 2 things that we're hoping to provide to help with the duplication problem.
Thank you so much, Reshma. I'm loving hearing all of these different challenges, which we see both at MIT and also in our classes there, and also in the real world. And isn't it wonderful to always have challenges to solve? I feel like maybe this is one of the places that you would hear that, but maybe in other places people are like, what challenges? So I just want to say that's so great. And I don't know, for Christine and Tian, do you have anything to add to some of the challenges that you are seeing in your initiative?
Yeah, I think, Wendy, you actually touched upon, I know Tian already talked about the sourcing and just the logistical challenges behind sourcing PPE. We could probably talk a lot longer about that, but I think I wanted to also just talk about like the challenge in getting started, because we had so many ideas. There's no lack of challenges here. Like if you want to contribute, there's just like so many ways. It's just a matter of choosing one and going with it, I'd say, because like when we first started this, our team has just a lot of perfectionists on the team, and we were like, oh gosh, how do we know, like how do we exactly match demand and supply, like how do we make sure the masks are perfect, like how do we, you know, there were a lot of things that was like we're going for perfection. And I think like Tan mentioned, it feels like a early stage startup where you're just like, you know, you just got to go and figure it out along the way and try to make those decisions, because every single day matters. And, you know, any delays there, you feel that sense of urgency, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I think if those of you on the call are struggling with like, you know, I don't know where to start, I don't know, just start somewhere. Like choose something small. We started off just saying, how do we help our friends? And then as you figure it out, you can make it bigger, but maybe just kind of pick something. You know, we had also talked about pick something and like find someone who can help you think through ideas. Like our friend who's a hospital administrator, she had so many more ideas, right? How do you source food for the hospital workers? How do you get those donations from corporations? How do you find housing for hospital workers who might need to quarantine and they don't have a place? You know, there's just so many, there's no shortage of challenges. I think that's kind of the other main challenge that we ran into along the way, is like avoiding that need for perfection and just bias towards action right now, because that is maybe more helpful than finding the perfect solution.
Thank you so much. And, you know, on that note, since Christine mentioned there's a lot of recruiting, you know, friends who have expertise in various areas, I'd love to get into the topic of volunteers. And it sounds like all of your organizations require the help of other volunteers. So how have you been able to recruit other volunteers to help with your initiative? We can go in the same order: Pooja, Rishma, Christine, Tan.
Sure. So one of the things that we latched onto was Facebook site. There's several ways of doing this. One of the things that I've seen coming up is the Facebook site, MIT Alums Helping Alums. There are a number of classmates that subscribe to these lists. I would say we started using that mechanism in Medium. The other thing that we're trying to do is working through the clubs and the classes itself. That might be more specific to our initiative in terms of trying to figure out how to recruit volunteers, but that's what we're going to be piloting and starting.
So for Identify the Immune, we started with a core group of volunteers who were on maternity leave, so that was our source. But we actively recruit COVID positive volunteers, and so our main leverage for that has been Facebook, who donated, actually Facebook employees donated ad credits to our initiative, and we basically run ads all day. You know, are you COVID-19 positive? Please register here. And that has been the source majority of our volunteers, as well as posting on Craigslist and other free sites where people list volunteer opportunities. And I think one of the interesting things that comes into this recruitment effort is there's actually quite a bit of news coverage about COVID, but there's not a lot of people who are doing advertisement on those properties. So if you're seeking volunteers and you want to run ads, this is actually a lot of good channel to reach people, because there isn't a lot of competition.
And Rishma, before we pass the mic over to Christine and Tian, I wanted to surface a question that Niharika asked. She says, I know several individuals who have almost certainly had COVID-19, but never tested positive, parentheses, their family members did though, parentheses, in parentheses. Any way to refer them to identifyimmune.org?
So there is an email address it's hello@identifyimmune.org. We do have some volunteer research opportunities for those who believe they have tested positive, but are not for sure, didn't have their test. And I'd ask them not to sign up, but to email the alias, and someone will email you back those opportunities.
And then I also just saw that Suzanne asked, have you connected with major health organizations like Kaiser who might be able to encourage your patients to volunteer?
Yeah, good question. We have worked with several large healthcare institutions. I think they're sensitive that they don't want to push people to a certain initiative, but they do provide information you can check this out if you're interested. And we have people who have come through those channels for sure as well. I think that there's kind of a very careful balance. You don't want to reach out to people and have them, they've been very ill and have them be solicited to participate in a drug trial. So we're trying to take a fine balance between doing outreach when people are in hospital versus when they've come home.
Thank you.
Tian, I'll let you take this one because I feel like the volunteer side, you've been way more involved in that community piece.
Yeah, I think, I feel like for our efforts on the PPE donation side, I think we've run pretty lean, where the four of us have, I mentioned earlier, we kind of divide and conquer a bit. And so it's worked out fairly well, and it's fairly high leverage in terms of we can, whether it's ordering 1,600 masks like we did with our first shipment, or maybe, I'm coordinating a 10,000 mask effort now, the amount of time it takes, it doesn't really change. It just requires one email. It's amazing how much technology has simplified, basically has had this massive multiplier effect where it makes searching for information easier, makes ordering easier, payment easier, everything easier. So I think relatively speaking, we've been able to run lean. I think where we have leaned on our volunteers are on two sides. One is distribution. So when we get the masks in, how do we get the masks into the hands of doctors? And then two, who are the doctors who are willing to raise their hands and say, you know what, I'll trust you guys and take those masks. And on those two sides, it's predominantly just been our friend networks. And I think that's worked out pretty well. And specifically, I think for the healthcare workers, we knew from the beginning that we can't go through state, city, or hospital systems. And we really had to just put them in the hands of doctors who desperately need them. And so that simplified it, and doctors were volunteering to take these masks and use them, and sharing the links for sort of requesting the PPEs pretty easily. And then also on the distributor side, it was just having friends located in cities that were affected and then redistributing from there. So I think that's worked out pretty well. And then lastly, I think it is that where, on GoFundMe, I did a search 2 days ago, and there are 2,600 GoFundMe projects with the keyword PPE. 7 days ago, it was 1,900. So over the span of 4 days, there were 400 more or 600 more projects. There's not a shortage of volunteers. There's a shortage of information sharing. There are data silos here. There are information silos. And people are also afraid, and the silos exist not for bad reasons. Sometimes people are afraid that on the PPE side that the information gets misused. That if they share their source, that it gets shared with someone who really has a strong profit motive, and then the prices of PPEs goes up. And so So I think sort of the volunteer side, where that friction sometimes is around trust. And that's been, we talked about challenges earlier, and that's actually another challenge. And who do you trust in some of the efforts?
And Ken, on a somewhat related note too, Nori asked, are there any supply chain efforts more on the testing kit side instead of masks that you're aware of, since you're working with a lot of supply chain?
Yes, there are a lot of companies tackling this, and I think there are a couple of different ways. I'm not the medical expert. I think Rishma and Pooja, you guys probably can talk a lot more about this, but as far as I know, there are quite a few startups to large companies who are doing rapid testing and different technologies for tests.
Yeah, I'm going to type in the, what do you call it, chat, but there is a public Airtable with all of the, sorry, just figuring out how to use this on the fly.
I think you can do to all panelists and attendees. I just saw there's an option for that.
There, I just replied to Nori. So, so Identify the Immune is actually helping with some of these clinical research studies to validate some of these tests, but there's a lot of serological tests and rapid PCR tests that are being kind of developed. So a few thoughts here. One, the FDA has not approved any tests for home use. I think that they're only for use like at the point of care or in the lab for the doctor. So if you see any of those are not approved by the FDA. They're probably sourced from somewhere that is unknown. But there's a few issues that make testing pretty difficult. The current PCR tests, where they put the swab pretty much in your nasal cavity, like really far back, there's a limited amount of capacity at labs like LabCorp and Quest to really process those fast and at high scale. So some regions are running into rationing there. There's serological tests, which is like, so there's some kind where they take blood from your arm, or you can prick your finger and put it on a strip. Those tests have like, they'll have false negatives, because like if you don't have antibodies in your blood, you're just beginning your infection, then you know, you could say, oh, you have no antibodies, but you actually are infected. So there's kind of like nuance with how to interpret them, which is making the rollout of these tests pretty difficult. But there is a lot of active research ongoing on it, and you can see in the chat that I sent a list of all the vendors and people who are going through validation now.
And I know I'm aware that
sorry, Wendy, I was just going to add to that.
No.
So Tian and Christine, I mean, and others that are working on projects that require sort of more centralized distribution. So I'm kind of putting my other hat on as a former hospital administrator. I actually, while we were talking, Tian, I just texted a contact in Massachusetts and New York. One of the centralized agencies that works really well is for example, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, right? So it's almost like a local FEMA, but they are truly central in terms of coordinating distribution, not just to one hospital, but all of the hospitals across the state, right? And they have a pretty good tally because they're doing daily check-ins, probably multiple times a day, with each of the hospitals. So they know, you know, how many ventilators are available, how much, you know, what is your PPE shortage, what are your challenges today? So I've been telling a few different folks who've been, you know, MIT alums to try to work with contacts at these agencies. Every single state has one, and it could be a great start. So we'll connect.
That sounds great. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I love that. And then I know we have about just 9 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more question. I know I've sprinkled some of the Q&A through, but I wanted to get to the Q&A, as many of them as I can. So apologies to those who I can't get to, but we'll send out, again, more an email with all the different links where you can learn more about each of these initiatives after. And also, so my last question is, We have, and I love this, there's an anonymous viewer who said, I am a real estate trained alumni working in housing and restaurants. I saw lots of restaurant colleagues laid off, which is very sad. My hearts are with them. I hope I could work with them to see any new form of food services that can be innovated. And I think that's very much a spirit of the MIT alum community. It's like, how can we help in these situations, despite it being not a great situation? So I like to pose a question to you of, what would you say to alums who are thinking about starting, trying to contribute in their own ways, just an inspiration or advice, something that you'd like to leave them with?
So I'll start. If there's, I think that I totally feel the anonymous attendee who was saying that many folks were laid off. It's a really tough time for people. I would comment that there's almost no help that would be too small. Like my sister was helping some restaurant folks, apply for the small business loans that you can get to help your business during this troublesome time. And it's not like a huge effort, of course. It's like helping, one person that fill out their form, but it's really impactful for that one person. And maybe if there was something similar like that that you could do for your friends, that would be really meaningful.
I would just say, kind of jumping on what we had said earlier, in terms of saying to other alums that are trying to figure out how to give in their own ways. First and foremost, just make yourself aware of for example, what MIT is doing, what MIT alums are doing. You can design your own initiative, or you can join an existing one. And there are multiple resources that you pointed out, Wendy, that folks can use to figure out what's going on. So in that sense, and I do think, actually, it's funny now that I'm hearing you talk, Reshma, I think that, we have a lot of other older alums that are probably looking for retired and may have ideas on how to contribute. So we might need to just add that question into our, give that question to our volunteers, but just do it.
Yeah, I think same. No help is too small. And everyone has their own personal situation, right? Like, Reshma, I'm just so impressed that you're doing this on maternity leave. Like, for a lot of new moms, I think they're just trying to survive day to day, right? So I think it's really a personal decision. You have to decide how much time that you can spend and, maintain your emotional sanity. But even if it's just like helping your parent friends come up with an activity for their kids, that's just a huge help. So I think that, I also saw some questions in the Q&A, like, how are you reaching out to folks like Facebook to get ad credits? Tap into your network, just start somewhere and be scrappy, and don't worry about the official way. Nothing is official right now. Everyone's just trying to figure it out. So I think that just try to bias towards action and do something. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Try something else is my encouragement.
Yeah, I guess I think I'll talk about it on 3 levels. One level is sort of the societal level. I've lived in New York for 12 years. So I was in New York during 2008, during the financial crisis, and it felt like the end of the world. This is like a different scale. It's a different type of crisis, but it also impacts everyone. In our lifetime, there's a handful of times like this where things are normal, and the world needs people to just spend some time and actually just contribute. There's just very few times. So I had this conversation with my girlfriend because we're like, okay, this is like, we're doing all of these things, and it's distracting from our work. but then we realize that there are so few times in our lives that we can maybe make an impact in a meaningful way. And I think this is one of those times. So from a societal level, I think I definitely encourage everyone to help, no matter how small or how large. It's every little bit matters because this really truly impacts everyone. So that's one thing. I think on the second level is think about your friends. You don't have to do it alone. If you're interested in doing something, I think all of us are doing this in a group format. And so think about your strength and how you can contribute in an area that you feel like is meaningful. And I think the last level is just like doing it for yourself. I think being engineers, where we all want to help, we all are drawn to challenges and problems. And if you just do a little bit, speaking from personal experience, I didn't expect to spend as much time as I did and work as late into the night as I did to do this many different things. But I'm doing it because honestly, for the past 3 weeks I've done this, I have felt more alive. I have felt more energized with less sleep, simply because I felt like what I'm doing is actually positive and matters. And so I think yes, it's going to require time. Yes, it's going to require some risk taking, but importantly, I think if you do this, you'll find that maybe there's something that's actually really positive that happens and shapes your life. And you just you can't wait to just get up out of bed and just go do this thing, So yeah, definitely encourage you guys to go for it.
Oh man, the MIT spirit continues. It's like the MIT experience. We just can't get away from it, and boy, do we love it. I do want to be mindful of time. I will invite the panelists to stay on to answer the other questions if you do have time. If not, totally okay. But I do want to be mindful of those attendees who need to go now. So I'm just going to wrap up really quickly before we go back to some of the unanswered questions. So thanks to everyone again for joining. Again, if you are interested in joining some more of the events that the MIT Club of Northern California is hosting, please go to mitcnc.org. And actually tonight from 8 to 9 p.m., a little bit of a different kind of event. Our own Harbo will be hosting a poetry slam. I've been told that when I say poetry, it sounds like the chicken poultry, so I'm sorry, it's Poetry slam. If you want to do a poultry slam, I'm sure there's a cooking event later too, but this is specifically to the art of poetry. I think I said that right this time. So anyway, that's from 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific time tonight. For those of you who are joining us from around the world, for your other friends who want to join some of our virtual events, you can ask your local alum clubs. And then if you enjoy this event and would like to donate to the MIT COVID-19 Fund, you can do so at mitcnc.org/COVID-19. And then this series, the Frontline series of community and the community's Call of Duty will be a bi-weekly series. So if you do know of other alums who are doing really awesome things, please send them our way. We'll send up the follow-up email with everyone's links, all the panelists' links to their organizations, initiatives, and then also how you can nominate other alums to speak as well. So thank you all for joining for the official part of the event. And for those of you who can stay so that we can get the rest of the questions answered, I invite you to do so. So another question that we have is from Kay Subramanian, who said that the COVID-19 crisis is a leadership crisis based on failure to believe in science, failure to trust and collaborate early on, and failure to use globalization with smartness. Right now, it is used for lower costs and dropped at will based on nationalism. Thinking ahead, we need to change these trends, but how? Oh man, that's a big question. I would love to invite you to also contribute your part, as the panelists have said. to help others with better understanding the science and to what it actually means, instead of in a more fear-inducing way, but also to find ways to help bring everyone together. So I would probably say, unless one of the panelists have an answer to this, I would invite you, Kay, to join other alums and everyone around you to help in this initiative. We have from Michael De La Maza, who said, "I'm not worried about Boston, SF, etc." I am, but I think I'm worried about every one of them. But he did say, "I am worried about the South. Any specific ideas about helping Alabama, Georgia?" I'm from Texas, so I'm going to include Texas in there as well, etc.
Tian and I are both from Atlanta, so yeah, I think specific ideas, Tian. I'm not sure, because you're spending more time there. I think we've gotten a few requests for PPE in Atlanta and in Georgia. I'm mostly just trying to reach out to my doctor friends there and get ideas. But I think that, beyond that, I don't have anything specific that I've heard of.
So Identify the Immune does specifically do outreach nationwide, because we are trying to find COVID positive volunteers in the South, in the Midwest, and also perhaps do matches for folks who are within 3 or 4 hours driving distance. So I think with regards to specific initiatives that could be done in the South, like recruiting volunteers who have tested positive to donate plasma is a very immediate one. And I really hope that the government will start to focus on what can be done there too, because they have a big role to play.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Reshma. We don't like to talk about the P word, which is politics, but there is sort of this divide. Christine and I are from Georgia, and our state's governor just put in shelter in place into action at the end of last week. So it's been 7 days or something like that. It's pretty late in the game. I think in the South, what helps is that, this is COVID-19 thrives in density. And so where the South helps is that it's not as dense. However, if you live in cities, if you live in suburbs, there's still communal gathering areas. And then also in Georgia, for example, I think pre-existing sort of conditions can elevate your risk of dying. And so there's also in the South, there's that part of the game, is that when you get it, you might be more likely to have a worse case. So my suggestions are 2 things. One is that I shared a link in the chat. It's a website where you can check if specific communities, how at risk they are. So if you're from the South or any part of the country, you can check and see if for your area you're from or your state, what's their situation in terms of hospital beds, etc. So that'll help give you some ideas. And then I think the second part is, once you do see potentially maybe there's need for action at the government level, maybe just write to your congressman, and just sort of lobby on that side to get them to act.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who couldn't see the chat, the link is covid19.jvion.com. And then we have a final question. I know, Christine, you have to run, so please feel free to jump off for your work meeting. Thank you so much for joining. It was really great to hear your perspectives. And then we have Sonali Singh, who asked, do any of the panelists know about initiatives being taken to help prepare developing countries like India?
Oh, that's a great question. Question.
I do know. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Reshma. You might know specifics. I was just going to say, I periodically just check the switchboard, and I feel like I've seen things briefly coming through the MIT switchboard as well as the Facebook site with folks asking exactly that question and being involved with it. I know there was a big mask making initiative that was being undertaken by sort of a co-group of alums as well as folks from other organizations where they're trying to get folks, I'm talking about multi-millions of masks. So there is some information there. Reshma might know a bit more.
Oh yeah, I don't know specifically about the masks and the PPE, but there is a nonprofit that has started an app, which basically the premise is that there's some regions that they assume of developing countries where they're not going to have a lot of resources to do PCR testing or serological tests, or they just kind of don't have the healthcare infrastructure. So they're preparing like questionnaire apps where you can report symptoms or how you're feeling at a large group of people. And hopefully, I mean, the science behind it is actually pretty strong. Like if you have some sampling of people who are self-reporting symptoms, you could know that an outbreak is in a region and mobilize the local government there to do like a more intense shelter in place, make sure people go home, etc., or staff up that environment. And those are the initiatives that I've heard about in India, which I'm hopeful for. Like if those could be implemented, actually, if they were like implemented in the US 6 weeks ago, they would have definitely had an impact, and I'm hoping that they'll turn out to be good for a lot of developing nations. There's one called beat19.org and another one howwefeel.org.
Well, join me in a virtual round of applause for all of our panelists for taking their time and their energy to help with whatever efforts that they can. And we invite you all to do the same as well. I don't know, I just wanted to say again, for other events, for inspirations, you can go to mitcnc.org or your local MIT club. And I would like to just point out that there's both a poultry slam and a poultry slam, because we also have a cooking hangout. So on that note, stay healthy and well, everyone, stay safe. And we wish you the best and hope to hear lots of great things coming from all of you and how you're contributing to a better world. And hope to see some of you as panelists on the future series. Bye, everyone.
Wendy, thank you for getting all of us together.
Thank you for showing up.